In today's lesson, we're going to talk about multiplying integers. And of course, we need some vocabulary because of mathematicians and their names. So here we have a typical multiplication problem, and the very first number, which is the 12, is called the multiplicand. And it is a number that is multiplied by another number. So the 5 is called the multiplier, and it is the one doing the multiplying. And after you multiply these numbers together, you get what is called the product, which is the result after the multiplication is done. So numbers that are being multiplied together are also known as factors, and we are going to use factors a lot actually, so you're going to hear me say it. And 12 and 5 are factors of 60. Here we have 12 times 5. Now you'll notice that there is an X there, or what looks like an X, which indicates multiplication. Now there's other ways that we can indicate multiplication, such as a small dot. And the small dot I actually prefer to using an X, because sometimes once we get into variables, we're going to get confused if we don't have something else. The other thing that we'll use, which I also like to use a lot, is parentheses with nothing in between. If there is no symbol in between parentheses, it always means multiply. So we need to keep that in mind because I'm going to use different forms as we move forward. These are all just different ways to indicate we multiply. So what is multiplication anyway? Well, if I have 1 times 5, that tells me I have one group of 5, which we know is 5. 2 times 5 says we have 2 groups of 5, which is 5 plus 5, which is 10. I'm sure you understand where I'm going with this. 3 groups of 5 says 5 plus 5 plus 5 equals 15. And 4 times 5 means 4 groups of 5, which gives us 20. And it would just keep on going. But I think you get the point. So this is what we like to refer to as repeated addition. So multiplying is really just repeated addition. What about multiplication by 0? A number times 0, what does that give us? Well, based on what we just talked about repeated addition, if I have one group of 0, I still have 0. Well, 2 times 0 is 2 groups of 0, and we know 0 plus 0 is 0. Well, 3 times 0 is 3 groups of 0, which is still 0. And 4 times 0 is 4 groups of 0, which again is still 0. And I could keep going on. The point of this is that any number multiplied by 0 is always going to be 0. So let's go ahead and talk about multiplying negatives, because negative numbers is the one thing that always tends to give us a little bit of troubles. So let's clear that up. Now, if I take 5 times negative 4, it equals negative 20. Well, let's see why that is. We just said multiplication is repeated addition. So 5 times negative 4 means that I have 5 groups of negative 4, which is negative 20. Now, a negative times a positive equals a negative based on what we just did. And if you think about our number line, our negative numbers go to the left. So if I have negative 4 and then I'm going to add another negative 4, I'm going to keep going to the left until I end up at negative 20. Well, if that's a negative and a positive equals a negative, what if we have 2 negatives together? A negative times a negative equals a positive. So negative 4 times negative 5 equals 20. How is that possible? Well, let's talk about why. I have a positive 5 times negative 4, which equals negative 20. We just did that. I said it was a positive 5 times negative 4 is 5 groups of negative 4. So here we have 5 groups of negative 4. This positive indicates to us that we are doing repeated addition. So now if we look at negative 5 times negative 4, 2 negatives is going to be repeated subtraction. So this negative tells me that I'm going to do this repeated subtraction. Now think back to our lesson on subtracting integers. When we subtract a negative, take away a negative, we end up with a positive. And so we actually have 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. So we actually have negative 5 times negative 4 is equal to positive 20. So let's put that into practice a little bit. Now I have three numbers. 2 times 3 times 4, I multiply those together and I get the product of 24. Well, how about I throw in a negative? A negative 2 times 3 times 4, it's just like what we did before. A negative times a positive is going to give us a negative 24. Well, suppose I have two negatives. Well, we just discussed that if we have two negatives, we're actually going to have a positive. So negative 2 times negative 3 is a positive 6 times positive 4 is going to give me positive 24. And last but not least, how about I throw in another negative there just for kicks, and I'm going to have negative 2 times negative 3, which is positive 6. Positive 6 times negative 4 is going to give me negative 24. So you'll notice that when I have no negative signs, I don't have any negative signs in my answer. I have one negative sign, my answer's negative. I have two negative signs, I get a positive. I have three negative signs, and I get a negative. And this would continue on. So let's just do a couple more examples just to make sure we're clear. I have a positive times a negative, so 3 times negative 4 is going to give me, I'm sure you know, negative 12, because positive times a negative is a negative. Negative 2 times negative 3, we just did one very, very similar to that. Two negatives gives me a positive, so it's positive 6. 5 times negative 6, again, we have one negative, so 5 times negative 6 is going to give me negative 30. And negative 7 times negative 2, which again is two negatives, so we're going to end up with a positive 14 as our answer. Now, does it matter how many integers there are? And the answer is absolutely not. This one happens to have 5 integers, and I want to actually multiply those together. But there's a lot of integers, and we could add more. Does that mean I'm bad at math if I can't do it? Of course it doesn't. We are simply going to take those factors and we are going to multiply them all together, but only do 2 at a time. So I'm going to read from left to right. Remember, math is its own language, just like reading a book. I'm going to go from left to right, do 2 parentheses at a time. So 2 times negative 4, positive times a negative is going to give me a negative. So I have 2 times negative 4 is a negative 8. Notice I simply rewrote everything else. And now I'm going to start back at the left. I'm going to do 2 parentheses together. Negative 8 times negative 1, negative times negative is a positive. And again, I just rewrote what I had at the end. So positive 8 times positive 3 is going to be a positive 24. Again, I just carry this negative 10 down. And now I'm down to 2 parentheses. I simply multiply them together. A positive 24 times a negative 10, and I get negative 240. So in the beginning of the lesson, I mentioned factors, and you heard me just mention it just a minute ago. And they are simply numbers that are multiplied together. So you might be given the factors, which in this case, 2, negative 4, negative 1, 3, and negative 10. And you might be asked to find what is the number that has these factors. So I'm going to write all the factors as a multiplication sentence, and we are going to find the product. Well, actually, we just found that in the previous slide. If we multiply all of these together, we're going to get negative 240. And that is your lesson on multiplying integers.